Welcome to Commoner Law Group's monthly confab of free travelers. We get together every first Tuesday of the month to discuss what it means for Americans once and for all to be free on the highways and byways, which is our natural right. So every month we meet, and we often do, as we do today, have a special guest to present to us on a particular set of doctrines and legal procedures and theories that can help all of us to travel free. And as we always find out in these sessions, that we go further afield sometimes than just free travel, because the same issues, the same fraud that's used to make the average American think that they need to pay for the privilege of driving on the roads also applies to so many other areas of life. So we're here focusing on free travel, but the implications, the ramifications are much broader. And so we'll hear from our special guest, Rick Jones. He's got some wonderful things prepared to present to us with regards to some case law and the statutes. We're going to use California's example. He and I both live in California, so we're going to use that as an example, but you will find in whatever state you live in, you'll probably have something very similar. You'll have to do the research, some of the search terms that will be similar, and you can find for yourself in your own statutes, your own state statutes, the same things that Rick is going to be pointing out today. But again, thanks to everyone for just being here. Commoner Law Group does educational opportunities. You can go to commonerlaw.com and see what we've got available. Go to commonerlaw.com, the Great American Law Series. If every American took this course and understood it, we would have a new republic overnight. That's the kind of course it is, and I really invite you all to check it out. But thanks again for being here. I see David James Rodriguez, my co-host, is showing up just now. We'll want to hear some words from him. He always has wonderful words of encouragement. The message I take from David is a message of positivity, a message of optimism that we will be free again. It's happening, in fact, and that there's a huge resurgence and interest. Some people call it an awakening of people stopping to ask, what is the relationship between us and government, and how did we get here? And then that awakening, people are starting to learn the principles of governance and starting determining that they want to be free, because that spirit of freedom is in all of us, and maybe it's been suppressed or educated out of us, but it's coming back in force. What do you say, David?
Yes, I have seen it, Clinton. This is what I get so excited about, because I was just in Atlanta 2 weeks ago at an event called The Next Steps. And I met some new friends and seeing how people are taking action. And before that, I was in Morelia, Mexico in January with the Greater Reset. And you had Derek Bros on, I think, the last couple of months. And I'm going to Texas in May. And it just continues to grow. And in November in Florida, it's nationwide, it's worldwide. We're realizing we own ourselves. We're realizing we're children of God. We're realizing that we're here for something amazing, not to pay 40% of our livelihood to these criminals that are doing these things to children and adults and all these agendas. So that's the takeaway. When I go to these events, I say, okay, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. Yeah, the currency is probably going to collapse and there's going to be mayhem, but out of the ashes, we will rise, because you will be here, Clinton, and I will be here. And we'll figure out a way to do these calls or figure out other ways to connect with people. But we're dealing with psychological enslavement, which also means mental empowerment. The main idea is that we can do it, and not to lose hope, not to lose faith. They're really working hard to defeat us mentally. That's what Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, is that the supreme art of war is to defeat your enemy without even fighting him. And I've noticed there's parts of that inside of me that get defeated. And then there's parts of me that are conquerors and winners. And I think that's inside of every one of us. The awakening is not outside of us. It's not at DC or Sacramento. It's inside of me. It's inside of you, in my opinion. And once we start to get clear on that power that is inside of us and connect with other people. I mentioned to you, I'm going to a ham radio class tonight. I'm going out and meet people, so I invite our friends here to consider going out and meeting people. And even if they don't fully align, like for me, I'm a voluntarist. I don't believe government's legitimate at all. But some people believe in Constitution, and that's fine. We just look for common ground, ways we can work together in harmony. And my conclusion, as long as you believe in freedom of choice and voluntary relationships, I think we're on the same page, and we can move forward together. regardless of religion or all these other things, the race or all these things they try to divide us, that's their tactic. And that's why they pervert Martin Luther King's message, which was, I dream of the day where they judge my children by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. And I was just watching this review by Jimmy Dore, the comedian, on his show. He was reviewing, on is it ABC, The View, with Whoopi Goldberg and all those super status lefties in general, and corporate puppets. And he's pointing out how they're invoking the racism, trying to act like they're not racist. And they just had a guy on there, I can't remember his name, Coleman something. He wrote a book called The End of Race Politics. So yeah, I see a lot of good things out there, and I have to remind myself when I come to this monthly call and get reminded and excited, and get to talk with you, Clint, and the amazing people that are on this call. We've been doing it for 2 years now, and amazing guests, and there's the archive on the Commoner Law YouTube channel. And so it's just understanding that the direction has shifted, in my opinion, and we're no longer asking permission to be free. Of course, we got to be careful out there, but ultimately we outnumber these people by a huge margin, and they are terrified of that. So they try to divide us. But once we unite around a unifying principle, which for me seems to be the self-ownership principle, and which means you can do whatever you want to your body, as can I, as long as we don't harm anybody. We don't harm people, we don't harm their property, and we uphold our contracts. And the right to travel, I think, is such a significant part. I was actually watching some videos last night. Sometimes I binge on it because I just I study these guys. I study the protocols. I study the cops, and you hear the same thing. You hear the same language. And so I can kind of feel the fine tuning solutions of conversation and finding the humanity in the officer, like Derek was talking about, versus, oh, you son of a gun, you bad guy. Try to find the goodness in these cops. And then here's an extra bonus. I just saw, have you guys seen the documentary called Peace Pilgrim by a woman who walked 25 years across the country, 30,000 miles for peace? She was in her 30s or 40s, married but unhappy because there was war in Korea and mass murder happening. And she said, you know what? I'm going to divorce my husband. He's in the military. I'm not satisfied. And so she walked back and forth in the country. It's a documentary about her. And she said, if you have a big enough reason why, then the conditions don't matter. So for her, it was peace. And for me, it's freedom. And for other people out here, maybe it's right to travel or right to say what you want. All these freedoms are so important. And now we get to exercise them and demonstrate that these are God-given freedoms. They don't come from the government. They don't come from people. They come from the source or nature. And for me, that just really liberated me when I discovered that. Now it's about finding the good people which are on this call, and it's such a joy to be with everyone here. And I can't wait to learn about our guests tonight and hear some of the questions and comments from everybody.
Absolutely. Wow. I love it. Thanks, David. So much bright light coming from you. We want to have a great time here. This is opportunity for everyone to have their voices heard. After we get some great education from Rick Jones, we're going to open up. We want to hear what you're doing, what your experience is on the road. Maybe you've had a run-in with, you got a citation, and or maybe you've got a court date. Maybe you're a commuter and every single day you have to pay a toll for a bridge that was supposedly already paid for. Whatever you're dealing with, whatever angle you might actually at this moment be dealing with regards to the freedom to travel, we want to hear about it, what it's like for you, what you're going through, and what solutions you want to try. So yeah, that's kind of the format that we do every first Tuesday of the month. Put it in your calendar. We'll be here again in 1 month's time. And invite your friends, because as we do focus on freedom to travel, I got to tell you, the people who come here are just the most pure-hearted, the most clear-minded people that I have the privilege to hang out with on any particular month. And so, again, thanks everyone for being here. All right, so I want to introduce to you Rick Jones, an incredible human being that I met recently. He lives in San Francisco Bay Area. He is a wealth of knowledge. I think my job tonight is to slow him down a little bit because he has so much to offer, and so in such rapid fire. I know some of you perhaps will have heard of many things he's going to offer, but what we're looking for from him is to help us create a whole picture of what it means to be an American, free to travel on the roads, and what is the not only the constitutional or the statutory precedents and laws and statutes that are in place that uphold that right, and then what to do about it to be successful.
Oh, I just wanted to say, because this is called a commoner law group, I dropped the actual definition of common law. Everybody talks about it, but I don't know if anybody actually has a definition. That's the actual definition from the Giles Jacob English Law Dictionary from 1750. And I have almost the identical dictionary definition from the Thomas Tomlin's English Law Dictionary from 1835, but it's a little more expanded, but basically that's the gist of it right there. And it's pretty straightforward. And the common law is superior to all statutory law. The common law was in place before there was even a parliament or a government here or whatever. The common law goes back hundreds of years, and it goes back to actually to before the Magna Carta, but the Magna Carta and then coming forward, because the Magna Carta was pretty much for the English nobles. But the Englishman Bill of Rights, and it's like I want to say 1689, was basically the foundation of the common law that all the colonists knew. Also, as Clint was talking and the other speaker was mentioning, that we have unalienable rights that are granted by our Creator. It doesn't come from nature, it comes from our Creator, because all animals, wild or otherwise, have life and basically liberty, but only man has the pursuit of happiness, which is basically defined as the right to property. There's a difference in law between these two words. They're definitely not the same, and they're different. Unalienable with a U and inalienable with an I. Inalienable refers to civil rights, and civil rights come from government, not from God. Civil law comes from Roman civil law and being civilian attorneys. And if you look up in Bovier's 1856, it'll say that a civilian is a practitioner, a student, or professor of the civil law. So I don't want to get off track, but those two words are very important. So anyway, and the Constitution, if you go look there, it's not opinion. It says all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that means those three are just among your rights, and they're so numerous that they didn't list them in the Constitution. You can go to the 9th Amendment of the original Constitution, and it talks about the rights that aren't enumerated are retained by the people, or shall not be disparaged, or the government can assume that they were denied. And most state constitutions have the same wording in their state declaration. California does, Washington, Oregon, all the ones I've looked at. And it basically says that all inherent power is in the people. It says the people. It doesn't say persons or men and women. It doesn't say the courts. It says the people. And the people, as sovereigns, can delegate some of their authority to government. That's how you create government. And if you go to a U.S. Supreme Court case, and I sent it to Clint, called Chisholm versus Georgia in 1793, it says that the people are individual sovereigns. And it says without subjects, and then it says except for the African slaves. But the point here is a sovereign means just that. Nobody's above you, not government, not somebody else. So that's the Supreme Court. And again, when it said the Declaration of Independence, sovereigns move by declarations. They move by declarations, by writs, by proclamations, and by basically direction, because direction means a command to their public servants in government, because they're public servants, they're not public masters. You want to go to pages 471 and 472 of that document and see where it says no such ideas obtained here at the revolution. The sovereignty devolved, that mean was bestowed upon the people. And they are truly the sovereigns of the country, but they are sovereigns without subjects, unless the slaves among us be so called, and have none to govern but themselves. Okay, so that means, government doesn't tell us how to govern ourselves, because if you're sovereign, you don't have anybody above you. And the government was created by us, just like the King of England had people under him. They were the body politic. All the hangers on, all the people in government, the subjects, the freemen, all that stuff. Because in England, a free man was the highest status of the body politic, but the body sovereign was the king. So we are the body sovereign in America. We are not the body politic, because that would be saying you're both the sovereign and the subject at the same time, and that's not true. And the case law will show you. He has Chisholm versus Georgia. There's one for the Supreme Court of New York from 1829 that says basically the same thing. And there's several other cases. So it's very clear that the people are the boss, not the subjects. In the Constitution, it has capital C citizen. And everybody knew at the time that meant a member of the body sovereign. And lowercase citizen, in both in law and the courts, lowercase citizen, common citizen, is a subject. Is the same in English law as a subject, but it's a subject of government, because government basically control and can boss around what it creates. It didn't create people. It created citizens, lowercase c, who are legal fictions. That's on your driver's license. Look at it. It has all cap fiction. That's not you. There's a hierarchy, and the servant doesn't tax the master. The servant doesn't judge the master. That means any trial by jury, 3 words. The number of words and order mean a lot in law too, but jury trial is just window dressing for admiralty, for maritime jurisdiction. 2 words, jury trial. Trial by jury of your peers, capital P peers, means equals. And your servants, the members of the body politic, are not your equals. They are your servants. The schools have deliberately dumbed down everybody, and they've been doing it for a long time. In law, as well as English, a proper noun, that's a capital, as opposed to a common noun, have different meanings, and especially in law. For the corporate constitution, 3 words, United States Constitution. I didn't say Constitution of the United States. I said United States Constitution. That's the corporate constitution created by Congress in the District of Columbia to govern the District of Columbia in 1871. And all of its bylaws are called the United States Code. Those are the bylaws of that corporation. Okay, the organic federal government, its constitution is part of the Constitution for the United States of America, but it sets the framework of the federal government, what they're supposed to do, the 19 delegated duties that we delegated. We could make our own stamps, we could make our own money, we could fix our own roads, but we didn't. We delegated that to government, to our servants to do. Those 19 things, running the post office, postal roads, making the money, maintaining the Navy and all that jazz. That's what the federal government was supposed to do, because the states are a separate authority created, again, by the people. They didn't create themselves. There's no states without people. And the people created states and delegated certain of their powers to state government. And state government, they are the same thing. They're public servants, not public masters. So the right to travel has always been a right. It was right even to the freemen in England. Nobody got charged for, going on the highways or whatever. But it's an unalienable right to move from one place to another. And all sovereigns have that right. They don't need somebody else's permission to use the public right-of-way, which we authorized our public servants to create for us to use. If they want to, tax or whatever corporate entities that they create, both in commerce and otherwise, they can do that, but they have no authority to tax us or, quote, basically trick you into being the live agent for a fiction, because a fiction will never do anything. Everybody knows that. You can stick your driver's license on the table, go in and out for a year, and it's not going to run out there and drive your car. It needs a live agent, period. So this is a no-brainer. You're not the driver's license. It's not you. A certificate of birth is not the baby, because the baby's the baby. It's just evidence of a baby. So all these things in law mean something, and they've used them and dumbed down everybody because they actually used to teach law in the schools. There's a book from 1843, which is basically for fourth graders, but it has the original 13th Amendment, and that's the Titles of Nobility Amendment that all the attorneys will lie to your face and say wasn't ratified. It was ratified, and it was in this book in 1843. And in addition to that, I have a friend, Paul James, who has a certified copy from the Colorado Territorial Records of 1867. And that's way after 1843. And that shows the original Title of Nobility Amendment. And right next to it in the territorial laws of 1867 in Colorado, it shows the 14th Amendment, which is what we now call the 13th, because their corporate constitution, they pulled out the real 13th, slid the 14th back into the 13th position and marched on. And they could do that because it's a corporate constitution. They didn't need to ratify the 16th Amendment and all this other argument stuff, because the last ratified organic amendment was the Title of Nobility's Amendment that was ratified on March 12th of 1819. So again, we're operating under a corporate constitution, and Congress had the plenary right to create that constitution for the District of Columbia, but not to operate outside of the District of Columbia. And the way they got around that was with the term resident, because resident's another trick legal word. And that's what they're assuming you are when you went to the DMV and got a driver's license, because you have a right to travel. A driver license, not driver's possessive, just driver license, all cap. Same in every state, driver license. That's a commercial thing. And just because you have one doesn't mean you're engaged in commerce. But their automatic presumption is, when you're pulled over and show it, is that you are. It's never rebutted in court, because to be in commerce, you either have to be like Uber or a limousine or something where you're actually transporting passengers. Again, passengers is a commercial term, because Wells Fargo stages had passengers. But in your car, anybody who's not paying is considered a guest, your guest. So see up there at the top, now it looks like Pennsylvania does have drivers. Most of them is, because basically a driver is somebody engaged in commercial activity. Now see, Washington says driver, some of them say drivers. That's surprising, they didn't used to, but they're all capped. Okay, but when you get a driver's license, they never have disclosure on the application or anything that says, oh, by the way, this is only required if you're engaged in commerce, transporting passengers or freight for commercial compensation. So if they said that and you went ahead, but most people say, wait a minute, I'm not doing that. And in California, way back, I remember my mom, they called them chauffeur's license. And I asked my mom, why do they call it a chauffeur, Mom? And she said, well, gee, I don't know. And when you stump your parents, you always remember that stuff. Because even at that time, when I was like 10 or 11, I knew a chauffeur was somebody that, got paid to drive around, haul people around. And my mom hauled us around all over Hillendale, but she didn't get paid for it. So anyway, so they changed that because it was getting too obvious, and they just changed it. And again, they standardized it in every state, so it just says driver license or drivers. I saw some of those did, which I was kind of surprised. But anyway, if you go to the United States Code, I forget where it is in there, but it says that a motor vehicle is a vehicle that's used in commerce, because an automobile, and again, they pretend that your automobile is something you're doing in commerce. And I mentioned this to Clint. In the California Commercial Code, the Commercial Code of every state. In California, if you go to 9102 and parenthesis 23, it defines what consumer goods. And consumer goods are something that are used exclusively for your permanent use, or your private use, or your household. And so there's a number of court cases, and they can look them up. regarding both UCC court decisions and bankruptcy court decisions that consumer goods, meaning household goods, are not subject to license or taxing. And that means your private automobile, your private trailer, private motorcycle, your guns. Because if you go to the Second Amendment, they knew what guns were back there. It didn't say guns, right to keep and bear guns. It said right to keep and bear arms. And arms were something that everybody had in their household. Yeah, if you scroll down to 23, it's the same in every state. You just have to find Article 9 in your state UCC and go to 102 and see the 23 where it says consumer goods, personal, family, or household purposes. So you'll find that somebody I saw posted said it was in UCC 9109, but I went to California, couldn't find it there. So when I backed up, I found it in 9102. So I'm thinking it's probably the same in every state. That might have been a typo. But anyway, it's very clear that that doesn't say anything to do with commerce.
Yeah, correct. It doesn't.
No.
So if someone wanted to find this in their own state, they should probably search for consumer goods or household.
Yeah, well, they would search under Article 9 because the generic UCC would be 9-102 parenthesis 23. California is really easy because you take out the hyphen and that's the section of the California Commercial Code. But there's 9 articles in the Commercial Code starting with 1 and going through 9. So in Washington State, it's like 63A dot, and then it would be 9 dash whatever. And the same with other states. Oregon is one of the states that gets cutesy pie because everywhere it has like a number, like here, they change it to an alphabet. So I think that would be, I don't know what 23 is in the alphabet, but they would have that on the Oregon one. And every alpha, like ABC, they change to 1, 2, 3. So in Oregon, they can tell whether you know whether you're quoting, because see, these commercial codes have been passed by the state legislatures in every legislature. And so it's state law governing them. But the generic UCC hasn't been passed by anybody. It's just, it was basically formulated. There's an outfit in New York called the Uniform Commission on Laws, and it's just a bunch of attorneys, nobody appointed, but they have the uniform divorce statutes, uniform birth certificate, uniform, all this stuff that they create. And it's all created by lawyers using their statutes to tie people up. But there are remedies if you know what you're looking for. So anyway, that's just an example, because in California, if you go to Section 4 of the Motor Vehicle Code, and in California, they have the exact same thing in most Section 4s, Revenue Code, a Labor Code, whatever. In the Civil Code, it's in Section 6, and in the Code of Civil Procedure, Section 8, and in the Education Code, it's at Section 21. And these are all at the very beginning of all of this. Most people, the wording would just roll off their back because they wouldn't, know what they're looking at. You want to go to general provisions before Section 100, because Section 100 is, and most people don't go to the general. So if you go to Section 4, and this is important, okay, it says no action or proceeding commenced before this code takes effect. Now there's a comma, and no right accrued, comma, is affected by the provisions of this code. That means all the provisions, tons, thousands, whatever is there, and no accrued right. If you look up accrued right, it means vested, and your constitutional rights are vested from the time you're born, and they basically take effect when you reach the age of majority. But technically, your right to life is at conception, and that's a common law rule. I'm not making it up. But anyway, that term where it says comma, and then it includes the phrase, and no right accrued. And people are thinking, well, that means, right way back at that time. No, that's not what it means, because like there's other codes, corporation code, and other stuff like that happened like in 1948, and they have that same phrase. because no statute, and this is the U.S. Supreme Court, most of you have heard of it, Miranda versus Arizona, that says there can be no rulemaking, and that includes court rules, administrative rules, you name it, and no legislation, and that includes congressional legislation or state legislation that abrogates a constitutionally protected right. So they can't use a statute to take your rights away, and they know it. But they word it in ways where you look at it. Now, if it said, and no constitutional right, that everybody would know that, right? And say, wait a minute, because they can't use statutes to deny constitutional rights, or else the statutes would be superior. There's court cases over and over that said statutes are inferior to constitutional rights. That only makes sense. This is in California statutes. Some places they have it, but they basically conceal it with innocuous legalese that you wouldn't normally even register on.
I'm keeping track of all of these legal points you're making, and we're going to bring them back home and say, okay, well then how can I use the truth of what's written to free myself from any number of government overreach on the highways?
Okay, well, I sent you that stipulation of material facts, which is a template, and you can share that, because
you want to go there now? Okay.
Sure, because I wanted to cover who you are and why you, because it's obvious if they said all men. The Declaration of Independence is a universal declaration because it said all men, meaning mankind. They didn't go with the whole politically correct stuff back then. It meant mankind. So basically, it said all. It didn't say only the colonists, only the male colonists. It said all men. So that means all men anywhere on the planet are entitled to these rights. Okay. And government was created to protect those rights. And if it doesn't, it's basically in treason. It's maladministration. That's a term you can look up too. It's fun. But anyway, the point is no government has any authority except what the people give it. And what they give, they can take away. Just like the King of England put all these judges all across England on in different courts of justice, which are common law, courts of equity, courts of chancery, courts of maritime, all that stuff. Okay, but they were just bench warmers because his authority was over all those jurisdictions because he was sovereign. Okay, and that's an important thing. In fact, I'm going to drop a thing in here for you that explains, because under international law, and that's what governs sovereigns, there's no such thing as domestic law that governs sovereigns, because sovereigns are foreign to each other, and we're foreign to the government we created, because they're not the boss of us. They were created to protect our property and our rights, period. Anything after that, like running the government, whatever, they can tax corporations like IBM, whoever, because they applied for a government franchise. So they can tax them till the cows come home. But they have no right whatsoever to tax the people, their land, their profits, anything. It's just like, the royal tax collector marched up to the castle and told the king, hey, you owe taxes on this much. The king would look at him, look at his guards, say, grab that idiot, take him outside and chop his head off for treason because he's a moron. Okay? Because the servant does not tax the master. And this is hard for people to get around because everybody's been trained that you're a member of the body politic. No, you aren't. 2 exclamations. I won't use all caps because I don't want to use all caps, because basically all caps is gibberish. There's no, quote, legal format that says you have to have your case captions or anything in all caps. And if anybody can find that, I'd love to have them prove it, because there's a 8th grade final exam for to get out of the 8th grade in Salina, Kansas, that they have. And I haven't met anybody that could pass the English part. And my mom was an elementary school English teacher before she married my dad. And we were always getting corrected and I couldn't pass it. I was madder than the wet hen because the first question was, what are the 9 rules of capitalization? And I strained my brain and I could only think of 6. Could not think of 9. So I went down, I lived in Oregon at the time, went down to Powell's Books, which is a big bookstore, and found a used 1950s elementary school English book. And lo and behold, there are 9 primary rules of capitalization, and 9 secondary. But they don't teach you this stuff in school. And if you don't understand your English, especially if you don't understand legalese, because legalese has its own meanings. So if you don't know what you're reading and you think you do, without checking it out, you'll be sorely disappointed. So anyway, so like I said, yeah, you can go through that document and put it up there, and you can read it. And again, I always use John Quincy Adams on templates because I can show how it actually should be. Now, putting the last name in square brackets means it's informational and not part of the document. Now, you can actually write it and still be correct from John-Quincy because the first and middle name belong to you. Adams, or whatever your family name is, you don't own. It's shared by everybody in your family. So it's not your exclusive use, but instead of brackets, you could put a full colon after Quincy and get rid of the brackets because a full colon separates two different things. And your first and middle name is your Christian title. That's your birthright. That's your Christian title. And you own every variation of that in commerce. Somebody else can't say, oh, well, we get to use all cap and that means you're liable to us. No, that's your property, and they can be basically, after you give them notice, improper use in commerce, you can have a fee schedule for that because it's your property. Nobody else can say it's not. Everybody says, oh, yeah, well, your birth certificate this and name it in all caps and your mom. No, an affidavit rules in both commerce and common law, and somebody has to rebut it point by point. And it's not just somebody saying, I don't agree with you. It's somebody that has firsthand knowledge, which none of them do. So again, there's ways to basically, when you get, because most of the stuff they send you, including your power bill, is to the all cap name, which is basically used in many ways on what they call a Sestuke v. trust. But it can also be used because if you go in a cemetery, all the names are in all caps. That's an estate. And when the estate is closed out, then that name, that all cap name, is not supposed to be used anymore. But anyway, that's a side issue. So again, because you can read, people say, you can't get mail at a mailing address. Well, you can get mail care of, because an address, again, is a commercial term. But you can receive stuff because some people say if you're going to be sovereign, you have to have a, what do you call it, general delivery. And I haven't seen that. And basically, I would argue against it. But anyway, so this, like I said, was originally, I updated a little bit, but it was originally from 2009 because George Valverde is no longer the director. And if you get to the end here, it shows Jerry Brown Jr. and Kamala Harris as the state attorney general, and they haven't been that either one. So anyway, so this basically, and the blue stuff is stuff of special note. So you want to go back to the blue. No, go back up. You're at 21, go back to the first page. First page. Keep it going. Keep it going. Okay, you see that where it says right there, that paragraph, sensitive, you just passed it up, it's in blue. Keep going, right there, that. So you can read that because that basically, there are different ways to respond to them. And I've seen, because a conditional acceptance is similar to this. The difference in power of a stipulation is when both parties stipulate to material facts, there is no controversy for a court to hear because they've already agreed to the facts. That's why a stipulation is more powerful than basically conditional acceptance. Now, conditional acceptance does have its place, but like I said, this is way more powerful because they won't respond, I guarantee it. And again, what's called an inapposite response, which is not answering anything, just saying, "Oh, I don't agree with that." That's not a response.
Okay, so the this is you, the free man, stipulating to a government agency
Yes.
Okay.
Regarding a presentment that this one happens to be a vehicle registration, and this happens to be the DMV. It could be a court, it could be child protective services, county code enforcement. It could be to any county agency, any government entity.
Yeah, so maybe I should just read this. It's so important, right? This one paragraph out of,
Yes.
I'm going to go through all of it maybe and see where you can point out some of the highlights here, but this seems like a critical paragraph since it is the proclivity of an adversarial party to avoid providing truthful answers that vitiate their claims. The following questions are answered on behalf of the adverse parties to preclude a stalemate and miscarriage of justice arising from the adverse parties' joint and several failure to respond. The adverse parties or their duly authorized agent, duly authorized agent may enter specific and detailed objections made under the penalties of perjury to be true, correct, and materially complete. In the event we are not of one accord regarding the stipulated material facts. And so our agreement can be perfected into the administrative record. Wow, okay. So that's telling them that this stipulation has lawful authority.
It's binding, yes. And you might want to go up and read that first paragraph because that's important too. Because it's the same, state of Nevada, state of Washington, it's always all capped from whoever. So you want to read that first one.
Okay, we are the people with busy schedules.
We are all people.
We are all people with busy schedules in good faith in order to not waste your time or mine and to prevent any further confusion or misunderstanding and any ultra vires of criminal acts
or criminal acts.
Thank you. Or criminal acts, actions on the part of any state of California officer, employee, or agent, and so that I may be assured that I have all of the correct information and material facts, capital F facts, necessary for me to determine any lawful capital D duty or contractual obligation with the capital O to pay any money that might be due and owing by the undersigned to the federally subchartered private for-profit foreign municipal corporation, which is styled as State of California. DUNS number. Wow, that's State of California's DUNS number right there, huh?
Yeah, it's one of them. It has several because it also does business as California all cap. That's a DPA, but it has multiple DUNS numbers. So does the Department of so does the Franchise Tax Board, the DMV, all these other ones. But anyway.
Wow.
So if it's a corporation, corporations have no sovereign power. California Department of Motor Vehicles, it has a DUNS number.
Right. Here and after DMV, the following questions are provided by the undersigned.
Yep. So then you can go into the questions, but that's why you can answer the questions because this is an attorney favorite trick. Now, understand, at the common law, when you're sworn in as a witness, you're sworn to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. 3 components, right? I just list 3. In commercial law, it's true, correct, and materially complete. 3 components. Because if it's not materially complete, you can lie by omission, and then there's no penalty of perjury for that because you didn't say you're going to tell everything, right?
Right.
And that's what attorneys do all the time. They say true, correct, and on my belief, and I think so, and this, that, and the other thing. It's always bull because they know if you go to a 1040, it says true, correct, and complete on the 1040, all 3 elements. So they know exactly what that means. They just don't want to be stuck because if they get caught and they say true, correct, and materially complete, that's perjury and they can lose their license and go to jail. So attorneys are very careful. Everything they do is what I call a liar's declaration because they never, ever say true, correct, and materially complete. It's always on belief or best of my knowledge, or I thought about it when I got up this morning or whatever. It's some BS. They know what the three components are. And they can't say they don't because, geez, they're supposed to know the law, right?
Yes, for sure. Very good. So then a person, if they wanted to use this document, would you recommend that they have every single one of these? Or is this a kind of thing where you can pick the ones that are appropriate to you, the ones that make sense for your
Well, again, if it doesn't have to do with the vehicle code, if it has to do with the health and safety code, wearing masks or whatever, because you can go to the whole health and safety code in California and go look at section 4. I guarantee what it says, almost word for word identical to what you just read in the motor vehicle. The same with the education code at section 21. So if you're talking about, teachers or school districts, then you use the education code. But again, this is for the DMV. And a lot of it will apply to every agency.
I see. So yeah, so this is all good for DMVs everywhere, or people's.
Now see right there, in accord with the common law of England. And you can go to Civil Code 22.2, and it says the rule of decisions in the courts in this state is the common law of England, just like it says there. And it's the same in all 50 states. Louisiana originally was, the rule was Napoleonic code, but when they became a state, they have to use the common law of England too. All 50 states, and you can find it. Somebody in Illinois couldn't find it, and I found it in about 5 minutes and sent it to them. Because there's a whole act about the common law in Illinois, that the common law of England, except for the statute of George the First, and goes down all this stuff is hilarious. And then it says, is the rule of decisions in the courts of this state, but it's way more specific.
Okay, right. If no lawful responses are received within 10 business days from the date of the verified receipt, this commercial document provides all parties with written notice of rescission of all contracts or agreements, whether expressed or implied, which may exist between the undersigned and the DMV for, quote, fraud in the inducement, unquote. And herewith, the undersigned makes lawful demand for a full and complete accounting and prompt refund of all fees and fines paid by me to the DMV from the beginning to date. Wow.
Yeah. Now, there's a phrase there that you want to look at. It's in the last paragraph, and it says right next to bold, unless, and you follow that, which is your peace officer, because a peace officer is not a law enforcement officer. And generally, a peace officer is supposed to be the sheriff. But it says, believe that the undersigned has committed a malum in se crime. Okay, there's malum in se and malum prohibitum. Malum prohibitum is man-made legislative law. Malum in se is evil of itself. Murder, rape, fraud, theft, all that stuff. Those are common law crimes. And they're secondarily defined in statutes. The definition of murder at common law, it basically says, taking another life, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, those and malum prohibitum is one day, like it was, you don't need seat belts, and the next day, it's a punishable offense, right? So that's man-made. Has nothing to do with nature, nothing to do with intent, and those don't apply to the people. The state can make all those regulations till the cows come home, but they apply to commercial users of the highways, not to us.
I didn't know the Latin.
Yeah, if you run over somebody or hit their car or run over their fence or mailbox, that's an actual crime. You've damaged somebody. But if there's no injured party, there is no crime.
Absolutely. Okay.
They can be adapted because, again, the head of the DMV and the governor and stuff has changed here. But the principles are pretty much the same, and it can be used by anybody in California. But that was specifically for renewal of a license. But you could use it, in advance of putting your own plates on, and say, basically it's a stipulation. As one of the people, and that's the body sovereign, you can go to California Government Code, section 100, parenthesis small a, And that can be used by people in every state because the Constitution says all the rights and prerogatives of the capital C citizens in one state are basically available to all the citizens, capital C, in the several states. And I can find that in the Constitution. And it's pretty much clear because it says the sovereignty of the state resides in the people. That's like a no-brainer, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, to me
And
it
so
is.
if it resides in the people, how does the master get taxed or charged or whatever by the servant? They don't. So this is the game they play. And it's pretty much done by bar attorneys who've infiltrated all levels of government. Because here's another thing the people listening might think, because it's very clear that if you're a citizen in one state, you can't be a member of the government in another state, right? That's pretty much prohibited by all state constitutions. You actually have to live in the state to be an actual member of any part of the government, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, riddle me this, okay? Because an attorney, and all the courts have said this, is an officer of the court, right? The court's the judicial branch, right? So how can an attorney in Washington be licensed in Nevada, California, Oregon? You know, how does that work? Nobody else gets to do that. And how can you be an officer of California court if you're living in Washington state, right? So again,
they're breaking the rules, or does that just reveal that there's some other
that reveals that they can be a member of a corporation if they pay the fee, and that's what it is. They're all corporation. I just showed you the DUNS number for California. State of Washington, state of Oregon, state of Nevada, you can go all through all of them. All of them have DUNS numbers. All of their courts have DUNS numbers. The United States Supreme Court has 3 DUNS numbers. One of them, and they're all the same address. It's 1 circle something or other, Washington, D.C. But anyway, the first one is for as a subsidiary. It doesn't say for what, and it has a DUNS number. Then there's 2 more with the same address that said basically branches. So I don't know branches of what, but it says branches. So to have done, like I said, there's a total of 3 DUNS numbers, which indicates that's not the real Supreme Court. It's anything that has a DUNS number is an inferior, limited jurisdiction, limited subject matter court, because they have to show on their record that they have jurisdiction. They have to show territorial venue, which they never do, because look up the definition of in this state. And I've looked it up for like 15 states. It's pretty much identical. But in California, if you go to the Revenue and Taxation Code and go to 130, section 130, parenthesis small f, and also the Revenue Code at section 6017, that's sales tax, and 130F is property tax. And that definition, people read it and it kind of blows their mind, because the word exterior means exactly what it means, outside of, but it means outside the territorial jurisdiction of California or whatever state, because it's geographically in California, like Yosemite's in California, isn't it? Okay, but it's not as far as jurisdiction, it's federal. So that's what in this state means, is federal enclaves in every state. It doesn't mean the state, because the federal district court of whatever is not over all of California. It's over U.S. residents in California. And supposedly these crimes happened in geographic territories that a federal court can have jurisdiction over. But that's questionable because it's never challenged either. So anyway, but the point is there's a lot of stuff going on. And again, the people are the body sovereign and they created government, and government is not the boss. That's the simple up and down of it.
Very good. Thank you. So how about we take some questions? Would that be all right with you, Rick?
Sure.
I'm noticing in the chat, there was someone who said that they got in an accident and they're asking about insurance. Go ahead and raise your hand if you want to ask the question, or I can just basically, if you're wondering how can we have something equivalent to insurance on the roadways as a free person?
Okay, you're not a person, because person, the minute you say person, you're talking statutory.
As a free man or woman.
There you go. Man or woman are terms of nature. Person is a term of the civil law. That's actually in Black's second edition as a maxim.
Right. Thank you. So insurance is also a commercial term, I'm sure.
Insurance is something from admiralty and is governed by admiralty.
Mm-hmm.
That's from a case, I want to say 1819 or something like that. I have to look it up real quick, but it's somebody versus DeVolio and his federal cases regarding the nature of insurance, which is an admiralty contract. So it's governed by admiralty law.
Right. So some people do have that question in general. They start to think, okay, I'm not going to have a driver's license, or, what if we have our dreams come true and we're all free to travel in our automobiles freely, and then people get into an accident, and even if you admit it's your fault, I did it, but I don't have any money to help to fix your car. That's why people have insurance, because it allows you to have an assurance or some sense of security, knowing that even though you may not have the cash at the moment, if you hurt somebody or harm somebody's property, that it'll get taken care of. Is there anything equivalent for free people, free humans?
Well, basically, yes, because if any, and everybody can look this up themselves, House Joint Resolution 192. Everybody's heard of it. They don't go look it up. But basically what that amounts to is, because they took our gold, the gold didn't belong to the government. The gold is the people's gold, the sovereign's gold. We were sovereign. Government doesn't get to take our gold. They took it. But what kept them from committing treason or being hung and shot was the fact that they were supposed to discharge any debt that we incurred individually or whatever, your house, your car, insurance, whatever. But the attorneys got in there and blocked the access to that. So there are ways to access that, because again, when you were, quote, born, they created a birth certificate, which is an account with the all cap name. But remember, that all cap name belongs to you, not government. It never belonged to them, and they can't show how it did. Because if there's fraud involved, then that vitiates anything they claim, and everything in that account belongs to you, regardless of, supposedly they created it. And that's why they need your signature, because every time you do your signature, that's worth gold to them, because they can access those accounts, and basically they double dip. They charge you for a parking ticket, say of $25, but on the backside, they commercialize that, and it's the CRIS system. Again, I don't want to go too far astray, but the CRIS system stands for the Court Registry Investment System. And all courts in the country, state and federal, are involved in it. And what that means is the Court Registry Investment System, the clerk of the court, of every court, acts like the accountant. And at the end of the day, they total up all the new cases and how much they're worth. But they have a book. We never see that. And for like a $25 parking ticket, it may, in their charges, which they charge, is like $100,000. But they charge you for the ticket, then they charge, and the court clerk gets a CUSIP number on each case. Each case has its own CUSIP number, and the CUSIP number is for securities. And then they sell these securities, the courts do, they bundle them, and all the state court cases go, there's two federal court cases that handle them. One is, I think, the Federal District Court in Chicago, and the other one is, I want to say Houston. But anyway, and they bundle them, and then they resell them to all these different mutual funds like Fidelity and Payne Weber, and I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. But they sell them in bundles like 100 million. But again, they only get that money if you either agree to pay like the traffic ticket or whatever, or you are convicted, or you plea bargain, because plea bargaining is the same as getting convicted. Even that's why a lot of people, they didn't do it, but they say, oh, you're going to face 20 years in federal prison. And then they say, or 6 months if you plea bargain and do good community time and all this other stuff. So they go, oh, wow, I'll do community time. But they've just allowed the court to access their trust, because there's several trusts. There's one for the birth certificate, one for the Social Security account, anyway, I don't want to go into all that stuff. But the thing is, there are ways that we can tap it, and you can have an indemnity bond that does tap those. And that's another story and way longer than this. But you can use that, and then if somebody's damaged, you can pay them from that bond and actually have their car fixed or whatever. But that's a whole different thing. You're a sovereign, and if you damage somebody, you're supposed to be able to pay. And as sovereigns, everything in government belongs to us. Okay, that's just like Alaska Pipeline. The state of Alaska is paying all the people up there a dividend because in actuality, everything, the forest, the oil in the sea, the timber, the gold in the ground, everything the government says is theirs belongs to us. It's just in trust by our servants. But, you know, they're supposed to be paying our bills. Nobody should be on unemployment. No, nobody should actually be paying any kind of insurance. But again, that's a whole different topic. So, like
Well,
I
yeah,
said,
it's a different topic. I mean, it's a whole, we could spend an hour or more on that alone. But what's interesting about the right to travel freely is that, yeah, it brings up all of these matters, you know, because the roads are a shared public area.
yes,
So it's definitely the public domain. And yet we can bump into each other because we're kind of going fast sometimes.
that does happen when people are texting or whatever. The point there is there are ways to have, you know, like a $5 million indemnity bond. There's steps to do that and do it so it works.
Right.
But as far as being able to travel, that's a separate issue from being insured. Traveling, like I said, would be a stipulation of material facts, which would go to the head of the DMV, the attorney general of the state, California, whatever, and the governor. Because the governor, his job, and even though Newsom is basically in abject treason, because the job of the governor is to enforce the laws. And the laws include the federal constitution that every state official has to take and the state constitution. Because if you breach your oath, that's what's known as a breach of a constitutional fiduciary duty. And that's treason. There's not little treason and big treason. You know, if you're doing your job and you basically damage some of the people and you don't have a bond, they have recourse to attach whoever that agent, all their property to cover the damage. But again, that's a second issue, because the first thing is if you're going to use their plates, then you basically are technically agreeing to their statutory DMV regulations. But even then, they only apply if you're engaged in commerce. Mm-hmm. So they automatically assume because you have a commercial license plate from them that you are, but you can rebut that by an affidavit in court. Because I tell people, never argue with cops on the side of the road because they have guns. And a lot of them are trigger happy. So just basically you can sign the ticket, you know, and in California it used to be the Highway Patrol said if you signed anything other than your name, like without prejudice or whatever, they'd take you to jail right then, which is under force of arms. That's threat, and it's called v et armes, under force of arms. And that's what they have. They have guns. So if somebody has guns and they tell you you got to sign, and there's a way you can rescind any contract for fraud. Now they say you only have 3 days for like tickets and stuff, but that's not true. There's no time limit on fraud. This is California Civil Code 1689 B small b1. And you can void any contract, the party that's damaged by the fraud. You don't have to go to court. The Supreme Court said that. You don't need to go to court. You just have to have an affidavit to rescind. It's called rescission. You can rescind any contract for fraud, and not just in 3 days, whenever you find out or discover the fraud. So if you know there's fraud and you send it to them and say, you know, unless you show me your oath and bond, this is a fraudulent contract. Because the only reason you signed it is because they had a gun. I tell people you can argue about signing it, but it's way easier to sign it and rescind it than have your window broken, have them drag you out of your car, take you to court, and all this other crap. So that's, again, hard way, easy way. I tend to prefer the easy, peaceful way if possible.
You've given us a letter of stipulation. You've talked about rescinding your signature from a from a ticket? Can you
It
tell
can
us?
be it can be any contract. It can be a mortgage. All mortgage
Okay, I
is
got you.
fraud.
I
But
understand.
anyway,
We're
go
doing
ahead.
travel,
Yeah.
and people are very interested in the topic. And so I'm going to ask you, what has been your results?
I've helped people and they've gone away. The tickets have gone away, depending on what they do and how soon they do it and whatever. There's a 72-hour, what's called a 72-hour rescission, but
Mhm.
it's actually more than 72 hours because it's a one-page rescission for fraud. And if they don't respond, they're agreeing that they didn't have the authority and they're liable for damage. So yes,
So
there have been some successes. There's nothing 100%. There's no magic wand.
when you say it went away, what do you mean by that?
They didn't pursue it further. That's on the stipulation I sent you regarding the licensing. Okay. They didn't pay the back fees, but they never bothered him again.
Okay, so you know somebody who sent in a letter of the
Now,
stipulation.
that was 2009. I sent you the stipulation there. They lived in Northern California.
Mhm.
And basically, they got that from the DMV. They sent it back, and the DMV never answered back and never sent them any more stuff for registration. And I didn't follow him year after year, so I don't know what happened after that. That's 2009, but he wasn't bothered for at least the year that I was around.
Okay.
There's terms and conditions, and commercial law is a double-edged sword because their own statutes, if they violate their own statutes, they can't claim to be enforcing the law.
Yeah, that's great to know. I guess what people would be looking for is to know, okay, so I sent in the stipulation, they didn't respond. My driver's license in the system is now considered canceled, or is it
On the
expired? I think is a
expired is what
category.
they use because that means it's still active, but you can rescind it for fraud. This was a stipulation. It wasn't about a driver's license. The stipulation can be modified for rescission of the driver's license for fraud. Okay.
So the stipulation asks for a rescission of the driver's license, and that's different than an expired license. So people would want to know if they've done this stipulation and they got no response, and they're out traveling.
Well, then if
and
you
they
get
pulled
no
over.
response, you can
Yeah.
follow it up with a notice of default to the same parties you sent it to.
Okay.
Because if you send it to the Attorney General and he says he doesn't answer back and say you don't have a right to do this, then he's agreeing. That's the maximum tacit silence is agreement. And that's why you have at the notice at the top. When there's a moral or legal duty to respond, failure to do so is agreement.
When you wrote this multi-page document that you basically leave them no wiggle room, but they just ignore you. And so you're out on the road traveling and you get pulled over and you didn't even bring your old license because in your mind it's handled, done, and it's not even a thing anymore. You're just freely traveling and you don't require to carry any license, but they ask you for your license. So you just take the ticket for driving without a driver's license?
Well,
Or
you can, but like I said, if you follow it up, you send that, it's just like in commerce. The IRS sends you 3 notices. And if you don't respond, then that means you agree to whatever the hell they sent you. But you follow up that initial one with a notice of default and 3-day opportunity to cure. You give them a chance to cure it. Because again, they are going to be personally liable. And there is other documents you can send with that or after that. That's a template. It has the law, and everybody here can look it up and decide whether to use it or not. But the point is, if you follow it up with a notice of default and 3-day opportunity to cure, and they still don't answer, then it's obvious they did. So then you will tell them that if you're stopped, they will be personally liable for any damages. And you can include a fee schedule too, but that's another issue.
So you send a default and then an estoppel and a fee schedule, and then you just go out and travel all day long.
Well, you can basically tell them that you're going to put your own plates on there. That's why I sent you household goods. You can put California, UCC 9102-23, private underneath it. So they can see that. If they pull you over, and you can tell the DMV, put this in your electronic system. You're required to by law. You haven't responded. You're agreed that I'm not required to do this. So it's your duty. And they have a constitutional fiduciary duty to protect your rights. There's a series of follow-ups you would do. But if you're going to go out, you would want to get plates so you're not using their plates. You don't need a license to travel. So if the plate says who you are, consumer goods are not licensable and not taxable. But you tell them that's part of your stipulation. That's why I included these new facts. So people can make up their own stipulation, can review the law and do whatever they want. You can stop them. Right now, you're dealing with people, judges and everybody who don't have the proper oath and bond. Basically, they're all criminals. They're in a ongoing, massive racketeering, multiple racketeering enterprises, because the ticket thing is just one of them. Taxes are another one. Property taxes, you can go down the list. But when you get up the level, your routine bar attorney may or may not know, but I guarantee when you get up to district attorneys, prosecutors, judges, and public defenders, they all know what's going on. But you can make them personally liable because they are not exempt from commerce. Because the people that actually own those different entities that all have DUNS numbers, they actually have shareholders. And to find out who they are and how many employees that court or whatever, it costs $350 per DUNS number from the Dun and Bradstreet. And they'll tell you, who the agent of record is and all this stuff. But the people that own those, U.S. Supreme Court, state of California, state of whatever, they expect their employees, and these are all the attorneys and whatnot, to obey the law. And if they're skimming, they will go to jail too, because commercial law is international. It governs both sovereigns and, regular merchants or whatever. So international law, though, there has to be a valid contract with, full disclosure. So anyway, but
So you said at some point that you asked them to take you off of the list. Is that like a do not stop list or something like that?
Well, basically, it's to put you in their electronic record to show that you are not to be stopped unless you've committed a crime. They can stop you if they see you run over a dog or a kid or a fence or whatever, or hit another car because there's actual damage. That's malum in se. You don't need a statute for that. They can stop you for that. As far as having the proper indemnity bond, that's a separate issue too. Basically, the information that I've given, people can research, do whatever they want, but it is unquestionable you have a right to travel, and that they don't have a right to interfere with that. But since you're dealing with people who are trained in public, more like indoctrinated in public schools, it's best if you go upstream and get a reply. You should be able to get a reply from either the Attorney General's office. All these state agencies, they have assistant attorney generals that supposedly handle stuff for them. So, if basically you're harmed, then they're personally on the line. But it helps to have an actual name. That's why you always go to the top dog of anything, because actually there's an agency over the DMV too. But so that way they're all in the loop and they can't say they didn't know. And that's important too.
See, folks, I told you time's going to go fast and that Rick's going to just have so much information for you. So just, digest it and digest it and digest it. And we'll take some questions. Go ahead, Erica.
Hi, how are you?
Hi,
Hello.
I'm fine. How are you?
Well, I'm good. I've been on before and I kind of just wanted to follow up, and everything that you're talking about is very relevant to my case that I'm involved in right now. So just an update. I got pulled over for they told me that I ran a red light, but my plates were not up to date because I've had to move 10 times in the last year. and I didn't have insurance, and the officer proceeded to ask me to get out of the car, and I refused, and then he opened my door and assaulted me in my vehicle and then dragged me out of the car. And the last time I came on here, I was still in tears over it, but I've since gotten the body cameras and my trial has been scheduled. But the officer, it actually got pushed because he is the key witness in another case the same week. So I'm wondering now how do I uncover a pattern of abuse? And the other thing that's really interesting is that two of the cops who are also involved in my case are now going after the chief of police. And I basically have them on video lying and covering up their body cameras, and they're charging me with assault of these officers. And he point blank asked her, like, they cut out the whole entire video, like his body camera that he had on, which I know was recording because I worked in the camera business and I saw the red light, which was what made me think to reach for my camera. And that's when he opened the door, because he said he was nervous because he saw me reaching for something, but I told him I was going to get my camera. Told him I was getting my phone to record this. And then he opened the door and I tried to close it. And then he ripped it out of my hand and came in the car and tried to break my arm and my neck and dragged me out like a rag doll. And then two of them jumped on me. In the video, I thought it was only one, but there were two. And at that point, there was no one who witnessed the incident. And he is actually an unreliable witness because it's his job on the line. And I've already put in some common law procedures saying that I object to their jurisdiction and, the whole thing. And they basically said, well, it's 300 pages and we're not going to read that. And it was supporting documents to go along with my declaration. And the state is now coming after my friend who's assisting me for practicing without a license. So I'm having a lot of fun over here.
Wow. You really are going for it. Can I just ask you a few, because I do remember a situation and it's brutal. I mean, man, this seems like an example of what we've talked about on these confabs a lot, where some police officers are trained to think of us as the enemy, like from the get-go. And obviously the way they treated you was that way. But I have a couple basic questions. So you're in criminal court, right? And what are the charges that they've got on you right now?
Assault of an officer 3 times, 1 with a deadly weapon, and resisting arrest. But the original charge said 2 resisting arrest and 2 assault of an officer, but then it changed somewhere along the line. And that's the other thing that I think is interesting that I've also learned since the last time I was on, was that I was trying to find the transcripts for where this supposed secret grand jury that they ran overnight, because it's the grand jury that's coming after me. It's not the guy who I supposedly hit. And in the video, he asked the other officer, did she hit you? And she point blank, and she said, no, this happened when I took her to the ground. And he goes, okay, well, I just need to know what charges I'm going for. And he told the paramedics that he was fine and he could transport me because she was already in my car and he didn't want to tie them up. And they gave him an ice pack, but these guys were standing there with their arms crossed looking at him, like they weren't like rushing up to go help somebody. And when they touched his head, he was just like, oh, it feels intact. And he tried to say, like, his story changed in the 2 seconds that he was talking to them. And then somewhere along the line, this other officer was the one who, was like, oh, well, we need to take pictures of her knees, and, like tried to spin the whole thing. And then they moved me out of his car into another car, and then they put him on a stretcher and took him away after he said he was fine and he didn't want to tie them up and that he could drive and there was nothing wrong with him.
So you're basically sharing with us the general defense is that you want your strategy for defense against these charges, but you're not you're not going to just simply do a standard defense. You're actually challenging the jurisdiction. Is that what I heard?
Yes, that's what I started with. And then they denied my counsel of choice twice. So according to the Supreme Court, they can't do that. And that also means that they can't incarcerate me. So the person who's assisting me says that that's a good thing. But it just keeps getting more interesting the more I am just here, like watching this unfold, and I'm fascinated by it. But what I thought I heard him say was that there's a way for me to basically say that because they don't have an oath to a, they have an oath to a foreign corporation, basically. And they might not have even taken an oath, but like I just keep knowing that there's got to be a way for me to get out of this before it would have to go to trial. Not that I don't think that a jury is going to see the same thing. And I've got another letter of character coming, like that'll make 6. And, people just laugh when I tell them what happened. The ones who know me the best, they're like, what happened to you?
Yeah, this is obviously, I mean, from what everything you're telling us, and it's obviously massive injustice happening here. And I'm so gratified to hear somebody who's taking the common law approach or the natural approach rather than getting stuck into the labyrinth of statutory rules and the rules of court and all the stuff that lawyers play by. Even before,
Well,
you're taking a stand as a woman on the land, sounds like.
yeah, and that's basically what I've said, is that I keep making a special appearance because I am challenging the whole thing. They entered a plea for me that I objected to. Like, it's not, they don't, and that's why I think they're actually coming after my friend, because they're pissed because he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
So he's getting ready to file a giant response to their, it's the prosecutor who's done this, and he got mad because he came out in the hallway when I wanted to ask him a question before we went in the last time I was there. And then it was like they scheduled me, my trial's not until, it wasn't supposed to be until October. And it's just like I was kind of horrified at some of the other things I heard when I was in there. There was another guy who came in from jail, and somehow, this is total side note, but like, I don't understand how he would be able to make drugs in jail and then be up for 105 years. That was what they were going to sentence him with. And
Yeah,
I
people should
couldn't
go
get
into a
my
courtroom.
menstrual cup in there.
Yeah, people should go into courtrooms and just see the kind of stuff that goes on. It's mind blowing. So thank you. First of
Anyway.
all, I want to appreciate you for coming back, bringing us up to speed, and letting us know you. And look, you're a model in a way. Like, you don't, like a lot of us, we don't know everything, and we're figuring out as we go. And obviously, you have a motivation to do so.
What was he saying about what I can file to like make this go away?
Real quick, Clint, I dropped 3 documents. They're templates for false arrest. Every arrest is considered a false arrest unless they have the proper components, which includes probable cause of an actual crime. Remember I said malum in se? Okay,
Right.
and has a template and has the memorandum with points and authorities on what constitutes false arrest, what they can and can't do. And those cases have never been overturned. But anyway, there's 3 separate documents. And also, Erica, tell your friend he is a juris, Juris, one word. Next word, consult. You can go look that up in Bovier's 1856 Law Dictionary.
I've got a copy of it.
Good. Go look up juris consult, because that's what your friend is, and they can't prevent you from having a juris consult, which is essentially assistance of counsel.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks very much. That's some serious help right there. So you can download those, Erica, from the chat. Do you see that?
Thank you.
Yes, you're
Yes.
welcome. Ken, you've been waiting
you.
patiently.
First off, you were wanting to get some stories about people who had successful results. Every time I get a ticket, I put on that ticket, no contract refused for cause, invalid claim. send it back. I never hear from them again. So whatever the ticket is, that's what I do. Parking ticket, registration, whatever. It seems to work. It's worked for me. So there we go.
Can you say that again?
All I do is I write on the ticket on whatever has been presented to me, whether it was presented to me in person or presented by mail, no contract, refused for cause, an invalid claim. And then I just send it back. I don't sign it. I don't do anything. I just send it back. And if I get it by mail, what I'll do is I will date stamp it, like received with a date stamp, or write it in red, received with a date stamp, and then I will sign that. Okay, and then I will write that other stuff, but I will not sign below, and then I send it back. So even if, let's say, I have a post office box, and so I don't get my mail every single day. So if it's beyond, let's say, the 3 or 5 day limit, I'm telling them when I received it, and I'm signing it. So therefore, that's an affidavit. They cannot rebut that. So that's how I do it. Anyway.
Awesome. Good news, Ken.
Great, right on. And first, I want to thank Rick for all of awesome information, and Clint, thank you so much for hosting. So first question, hopefully relatively simple. Rick, you kind of presented a very quick intro to the motor vehicle code, talking about how the motor vehicle code does not supersede, any pre-existing contract or pre-existing kind of unalienable right that we have. What I wanted to know, though, is where in the vehicle code do they actually define the restriction to parties and activities in commerce? I know that the word vehicle is defined and the driver is defined. I know all those things are defined, but I'm wondering, where does it actually link up to the word commerce, if there's an answer for that?
Okay, well, there actually is somewhere in the code, because it talks about that private automobiles are not considered commercial or something like that, but I'd have to go find that particular place in the California Vehicle Code. Because a friend of mine, Jackie Figg, used to, she's the one that discovered that. She was always sifting through the codes.
Okay, so if I did a search for like private and commerce, that would probably give me a pretty good guess in terms of where to go.
Well, yeah, I would think private. I'm trying to think what the thing was, because it said private automobiles and something, house cars and something else are not commercial vehicles or something like that.
Interesting. Okay, good. I will definitely do that. Second question, and this will be my last one, is I'm really intrigued with your concept of using a stipulation as opposed to, what are the other things they use?
Conditional acceptance.
Conditional acceptance is one.
Or unrebutted affidavit.
Let's see, an affidavit, basically, if you put an affidavit, quote, somebody else can rebut it, or if it's not rebutted, you can say it wasn't. But when you send stipulations, and this is the key, you can look up stipulations, when both parties agree, whether by their failure to respond or whatever, that's why you're answering the questions for them, then there is no controversy before the court. You can immediately go for damages because they've agreed that you have these rights and they're supposed to protect them. You can craft that stipulation. It's like remodeling. Sometimes you just, change the molding around the windows and the plates around the plug-ins and stuff. And sometimes you knock out walls and 2x4s and change the whole thing. But that's a pretty good template, and it can be used for about any agency. And basically they're all private commercial franchises because they all have, that's one of them. There's another one that specifically, and I don't see it, says that private automobiles and house cars are not considered commercial vehicles or something like that. I'll have to see, but it's in there too. That's a good one, but that's not the one I was thinking of.
Okay.
But it's
so essentially the stipulation is basically defining in an unrebuttable way the rights and the authority that you have that is being misinterpreted with whatever claim that they're making of a rule that they think you're supposed to abide to.
exactly. But on top of that, it is rebuttable. That's the whole point. That's the whole idea of notice and opportunity. you're giving them the chance to rebut it under the penalty of perjury to be 3 elements: true, correct, and materially complete. And they will never do that. I guarantee you.
I like that.
Because they can't.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. This is the first time I've really heard of somebody using a stipulation in this manner. I love it. It's very elegant. So thank you for presenting that information the way that you have, Rick. I
Oh, you're
yield.
most welcome.
Yep, I yield. Thank you. Thank you, Clint. Thank you, Rick.
You're welcome, Ken. Thanks for being here and for your serious attention to this and your great question.
Yeah, my jabber.
No, it's right on. It's right on. Right in the
Okay.
money. All right. Looks Portia's here. Hi, Portia.
Hi, greetings, everyone. It's a pleasure as always. This is another great episode of the Right to Travel. Love it. Yeah, I'm also fascinated by the stipulation. It's quite interesting. So it's my comprehension that as one of the people of the several state, I can apply this in my state as well without having to change any of the codes or the statutes that is cited here in the document. Is that correct?
Well, technically, yes, it's correct, because the Constitution, the National Constitution says that. I'll have to go find it real quick, but it's technically better if you are familiar with your own state's code, but you can use these, especially California Government Code Section 100 parenthesis small a.
Mhm.
That's uniform in all 50 states. It says the sovereignty of the state resides in the people thereof.
Got you,
Oh.
got you. And well, I would think you would need to at least change the Dun and Bradstreet number to
Oh, yeah,
represent
yeah.
those
You
states.
would
Yeah.
basically you can put in whatever state you're in, and it
Mhm.
will give you a Dun and Bradstreet number. So use your state. Now,
Gotcha.
you know, the Department of Licensing, Department of Vehicles, whatever they call it, they
Mhm.
generally have their own DUNS number too. But
Mhm.
generally that can be found on Duns and Bradstreet, because if you have the street address and the zip code of whatever agency in the state, put the title, you know, whatever they call themselves, Department of Licensing is what they call it in Washington, Department of Motor Vehicle in Oregon and California, and I don't know what they call it in other states, but they're basically, it's whoever licenses your cars, quote unquote.
And one quick final question before I yield the mic. The areas that are highlighted in blue, do you suggest that we keep those that highlighted in blue for emphasis?
No,
when
no,
sending
you
this
don't need to keep it
document?
in blue. Those are just things I've added or
To point out.
strengthened. Because when I
Okay.
change a document, my changes, when I update it, I put in blue. And sometimes I put whole section, a whole paragraph, whatever in blue, is because it applies and is good for everything.
Mhm.
So, but generally blue just is what I use on my documents when
Mhm.
I've updated them when they're old, or get a template that's pretty good and needs to be tweaked.
All right, very good. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful episode again. So I will yield the mic to the next person. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes. Go ahead, Anthony.
Thank you, Clint. I had a situation where I had a speeding ticket about 2 years ago, and I tried to stand on my square and go into court, and they ended up railroading me. They gave me a $400 ticket. I asked them, how do they expect me to pay? They gave me 90 days, and then I ended up doing a letter of equity to them, and then it disappeared. It got discharged. And so a year later, coming up on a year ago now, I got pulled over and I was traveling. I have my own vehicle, automobile, MSO number. And when they pulled me over, I just kept the dealer plates on it. It just says Laura's GMC and Buick. And when he pulled me over, he tried to tell me that I was speeding, and I told him people versus battle, traffic infractions aren't a crime. I asked him what crime I had committed, and so once he realized that I told him that traffic infractions aren't a crime, then he ended up calling back up. 4 or 5 other police officers showed up behind me, and he ended up basically under threat of arrest that was the only way that I was going to give him my information. I didn't give a driver's license. And then only under threat of arrest that they said that they were going to break my window, take me out of the car, arrest me, and impound my automobile, that I gave them my name and information. They were able to pull up my information in the system, and he wrote me a ticket and no proof of insurance because I invoked my Fourth and Fifth Amendment. And so I was about a year later now, I called up just to inquire to see if everything was satisfied or not. And they said that I had a warrant out for my arrest, and that basically I have to turn myself in, and I'd have to pay $1,000 bond and have to set a new court date. And so I wasn't 100% sure how I should try to move forward on that particular situation. I wrote to the court. I did a non-negotiable notice of acceptance in the beginning, and then I did a general affidavit, and then I also tried Thor's process, which was the cannot be compelled letter, and basically letting them know I wasn't operating in commerce, and that I was traveling, and tried to rebut any type of presumptions or assumptions they may have had. They never responded once to any of my letters, and I had to call in a year later to find out that now I have an active warrant.
Wow, you were in it, man. What a deal. Thank you for being the one to do it. What do you say, Rick?
Yeah.
Well, what I could suggest is sovereigns, and we're sovereign. That's why I went through the whole sovereign thing. Sovereigns have their own court. They're under international law. The court of the sovereign is always with them because, he is the sovereign, right? So wherever he goes is where his court is. There's no fixed location. But anyway, sovereigns move by writs. Writs are from a superior court to an inferior court, and there's different kinds of writs. But what I would suggest is what's called a writ of error of coram nobis, N-O-B-I-S. Anyway, there's different writs, and the prerogative writs of a sovereign are a writ of mandamus, which means we command. Quo warranto means by what authority. Prohibition means stop whatever the hell you're doing, to an inferior court or inferior corporate entity. Those are ones most people know, but there's a lot of other writs. Our courts are general courts. Theirs are limited jurisdiction, because any court that, even if it's, quote, in the Constitution of your state says it's a general court of general jurisdiction, the minute they go to a statute or quote statutes, they become limited jurisdiction courts. The common law deals with actual injuries, breach of real contracts with full disclosure act, but our courts, just like it says, if you go to the Constitution of the United States, it talks about the jurisdiction of the one, supreme. One and supreme are both lowercase. There's a reason for that. And then it says capital C court. It doesn't say one Supreme Court of the United States. Go read it several times. People don't understand what that capital C, there is one Supreme Court, and that's the people. The sovereign is the Supreme Court. End of story. So if you've damaged another sovereign, then you both have, quote, dueling courts. So that's why you have a jury of your peers of other sovereigns to determine who's right and who's wrong. The servants don't get to decide that. Your peers do. Okay, but if you have an inferior court that's coming against you, you by yourself can tell them to go fish. But that basically is what I would suggest, because when the court's still active, like the one, Erica, there's one called a writ of coram non judice. And that means that it's a court with no lawful judge, because it can only be a true court if the judge has both an oath and a bond. No oath and bond, then the judgment or any actions from a court coram non judice is void on its face to the beginning. But a writ of error of coram nobis is for a court case that's already happened, and they either have to correct the defects in the record or discharge the case. The preemptory writ of coram non judice, that means for an ongoing case. That's for an ongoing case. The writ of error of coram nobis is for a case that's already happened, like you were saying there, Anthony. And you can take a look at it. And the bottom, there's a footnote that says what a court is under international law. And we are governed by international law. Clint, you might want to show them 28 USC 1602, which is the beginning of the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act. Okay, it's 1602 to 1611. Everybody thinks, oh, foreign sovereign. No, that means like France and England. No, that means you. We're all foreign to each other, and we're also foreign to the United States government. It's called the Principles of Foreign Sovereign Immunity. The whole idea is you have your own court. The only time it's not effective is if it's against something that's happened against another sovereign, then it has to be adjudicated by a jury of your peers at common law. But other than that, because our courts are both common law, equity, admiralty, we're general courts. We cover all of them. So chancellery, so you might want to look up the jurisdiction of those courts, because we are a court of general jurisdiction, which is superior to courts of inferior or limited jurisdiction. And that includes all of theirs, including the U.S. Supreme Court, but includes federal and state. Because guess what? They all have DUNS numbers. So that tells you they're not real courts. They're tribunals, pretending to be courts, but that's another issue too.
Yep.
All right, thanks for that. Let's hear from Roban. How's it going, Roban?
Hey there. Good to see you.
You too,
Rick,
both of you.
the UCC code that you were saying putting on a license plate that you would make, was that 9-102? Is that what you said?
Yeah, for California, it's
Yeah.
9102.
Oh, 9102.
Yeah, California, they take the hyphen out. The generic UCC, because there's 9 articles and starts off with 1, 2, 3. 3 is like promissory notes. 2 is like leases. 1 is definitions. Anyway, when you
Okay.
get up to 9, again, you can find the same article in every state. You just have to go to where that one is, because they all start off with 1 and they all go through 9. But it would be in California simply 9102 parenthesis 23.
And also, I wondered, have you heard about anything like Regulation Z tags for the license plate from the DMV?
No, I haven't. Regulation Z is the right to rescind for 3 days. That's in most contracts, but there's no time limit on fraud. So the idea of 72-hour limit to rescinding something is bogus, because if any fraud is involved, then you can rescind it. People can quote contracts and rescission in the various state codes, but the principle is uniform. And the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, you don't have to go to court to rescind it. All you have to do is have an affidavit and file it into the record with the county recorder, but they don't want to. Even though the statutes actually say they're required to, they won't, because you could rescind every mortgage for fraud, and you wouldn't need attorneys and you wouldn't need to go to court, and they couldn't control it. So that's why the county clerks fight tooth and nail. But there's also a, which we've come up with, a notice of criminal liability under the revised statutes of the United States, which are still in force because they were prior to the bylaws of the United States Corporation called the United States Code, and they're still in force. There's 2 different ones. I want to say 5403 and 5408 of the revised statutes of the United States. And 5403 says that failure or refusal or destroying or adulterating or whatever, anyway, all this stuff that's deposited with any officer who's required to file, not just a court clerk, any officer, county recorder, any agency, when they get public record, they're supposed to record it and file it. The revised statutes were codified in 1873 and 74, but basically it's a $2,000 fine. And this was in real money and silver dollars, and 3 years at hard labor, and you can never hold any government office again. So I liked that one.
Well, because when I mentioned the Regulation Z, I had seen a photo of someone who had these little, where you put the registration tags on your license, where there were these little Z tags from Alaska that the DMV had the part of the remedy was to have some indication that you could put on your license plate that indicated that you weren't a commercial driver. And so someone had sent that to me as where those little registration tags are. And I didn't know if you had heard of that or if anybody.
No, actually I haven't. You'd have to research it. I tell everybody, do your own due diligence, because I'm giving you these documents. You can go look up what's there, and it's not my opinion, it's the law. So
Yeah.
Sounds like a new thing, Raban. Thanks for
Well,
that out there.
Yeah, I have an appointment with the DMV next week, so I'll see.
The California DMV, or just
that. Yeah, the California DMV in San Francisco, to ask them about this notation for that I can have on my plates, because my sense is that if I make my own plate, that's still going to probably flag them and they're going to pull me over and whatnot.
Well,
so
it could, but like I said, find out. I'd be most interested to know too, because
yeah.
There's also a federal DOT number that says you're not commercial. You can use that. I've seen people, and you can look it up. They basically apply for it, and it's free.
Leslie just got her license plate with that DOT number on it. Where the number is. I just got a photo of her with that. So
cool. Yeah.
The route.
So there's more than one way to skin a fish, but yes, you absolutely do have a right to travel on the public right of way if you're not in commerce. And their presumption, which is rebuttable, is that you are in commerce.
Right. And I wonder if there was any kind of official thing that, that one can put on their vehicle that just notes that, so that, you can differentiate yourself. So,
and then the highway patrol will be trained to know not to pull you over in the first place.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be a good thing. If you find out they do, that would be interesting, because so far I haven't heard anything individually you could use, but they change the laws all the time. And it's coming home more and more. The people are waking up, and they are going to be criminally liable. So I'd be interested if they had added that or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I have a photo of an Alaska plate with the Z tags on it in the corner. So it's at least in Alaska they're doing it. So, but I'll sign off because I know.
Just a quick,
yeah.
I have just a very quick question. If you're still a licensed driver, which I am right now, can you still rescind? I've not been having luck rescinding tickets, like a parking ticket. Should I give up until I am not licensed and not contracting with the DMV?
Well, basically, a ticket is a contract by itself because they get you to sign it.
Right.
But it's like that gentleman just said, and I've heard of people doing that and having considerable success. And I've used the one-page 72-hour notice, but actually it's beyond that, rescinded for fraud, and that's worked. And the tickets have gone away. And basically the tickets going away, I mean, permanently went away. But like he said, that would be the easiest thing if they let you write that on the ticket. But I wasn't clear if he wrote it there on the spot or wrote it after he got home.
Yeah, if anybody has an example of how they're marking, I'm assuming writing sideways, writing on the diagonal, and if anybody has what has been successful, a copy of how they write that out, I would love to see.
I can answer that question.
Oh, great.
So in the copy that you get and you take home, that's where you write it and you send it in. So, you sign whatever they give you, so he's got his copy, but then on your copy, that's where you're returning it.
Even just on a parking ticket too?
Any ticket where you're given a copy. And that's when you refuse for cause, invalid claim, a no contract, and then you send that in. Of course, you make a copy for yourself, so you have one. But when you send it in, you're sending them the original that you have.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And if it's already been in the works, because he's tried this, back and forth kind of thing. So in terms of sending like a one-page sort of, I don't know, declaration of fraud, or sort of calling it out. That's what you were referring to, Rick. Yeah.
Yes. Simpler is better. In the military, there was a principle called KISS. Keep it simple. And the drill instructors, it was stupid. But so basically, that's always the best, because the more complicated, sometimes you have to expand, but write on the ticket that there's no contract.
Refuse for cause and invalid claim.
Yes, that's true.
Okay.
But
And
if it's already in the works, like in terms of her writing a letter now, because you know the ticket's already been done for a long time. Like, I don't know, is there a way to find out like I don't know, an example or something that she could use as a letter to sort of, you know, write back to these characters?
the other thing I would suggest is that if you get a letter back, you know, like one of those billing statements, you know, for you owe so much money for various ticket, whatever it is, I would basically try to put that same verbiage on that letter. And so all what you're doing is you're basically demanding that they validate this claim. In some sense, yes, you kind of beyond that 3-day initial right of rescission, but then everything Eric is saying is that there's no statute of limitations for fraud. So maybe the answer in my mind would work is say, okay, cite the code that says there's no statute of limitation for fraud and add that to that letter that's come to you after 3 days.
Mhm.
And so now you're kind of putting the onus on them that they have to put up or shut up.
And the main focus of the fraud, would that be around the, like, would it be around the oath or around the contract?
Well, it would be both because number one, if the cop doesn't have a proper oath and bond, and none of them do, not the judge, not anybody,
Yeah.
then they have no authority to enforce those statutes, even if they did apply to you. Because see, the forum state of everything in California is in this state, which means the exterior limits of the state of California. Exterior means outside of. You can go look that up because that's important. Nobody ever challenges venue, but if that event did not happen in their jurisdiction, then that's fraud too.
Okay.
And nobody challenges because everybody think when you say in this state, you mean in California. They automatically assume that. That's what they're taught. They think when they're running around on the ground outside, they're in this state. Yeah, that's the absolute wrong thing. It's just the opposite. If you're on a military base, if you're in a national park, or something that's ceded, C-E-D-E-D, ceded back to the state, United States from California, then you're in this state because that's what the actual definition is. And if there's a technical legal definition, that's what governs the statutes. And if it's only defined in 1 or 2 places in the statutes, but it's used in all 29 codes in this state, then it applies to all 29 codes. That's the forum state, and that's a big deal. And like I said, you can go look it up. It's not my opinion, it's defined there.
That's great. Thanks so
Just
much.
one point of clarity. I think the real distinction that Rick is talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, is when you think of California state versus the state of California.
Exactly.
California,
exactly.
So California, there's 3. There's California state, and then there's state of California.
The all capital state of California. That's the corporation, and that's who's doing business.
Well, I was just thinking there's a geography.
Geographical, that's California.
That's
you can
right.
Say, that's the 2 miles out in the Pacific Ocean and Oregon and Mexico and Arizona. That's the geographical surveyed state. That's the real state. That's California.
And then California state is that kind of legal definition governing body of running the business of that geography, but using common law on kind of a land jurisdiction. And
that would be the Constitution of 1849. That
bingo.
was okay. So 1879 is the corporation.
That's the state of California. So
yep.
Those are the 3.
Yep.
Thank you, Rick.
All righty. There's templates there, and the one for quorum judice, 2 words, writ of quorum judice is basically for a court where there's no judge, and that's all their courts. But a writ of error of quorum nobis is after the case is closed, and it's still, whether it's against you or not, you can correct it or have them discharge it. Because again, if they can't prove that the case had the proper seal, and none of these courts use the proper seal. And again, real quick, a seal and a stamp are absolutely not the same thing. The U.S. Supreme Court said so in Aetna Insurance versus Hollick in 1868. A seal is standalone. It's embossed, doesn't use ink. Anything that uses ink is not a seal. It's called a stamp. And they're not the same thing. If the statute said they could use a stamp and a seal, they'd be home free. But go to Government Code 68076, and it tells what the wording of the seals are supposed to be. And understand again, when the legislature puts something in quotes, it means just like this many words, this capitalization, and nothing else. So if it's the same words, but it's all caps, it's not a seal, not the right seal. Because there are seals they use to authenticate their quote court documents when you get certified copies, but they're the right words, but they're all capital. And all capital is what's known in law as a common seal, which is used by corporation. And that tells you why they use all cap. They can't use the real court seal because they're not real courts. That's just a little aside. And like I said, you can go to California Government Code 68076 and look that up yourself.
All right. Thank you very much, Rick, for being here with us. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. I invite you to go ahead and open up your microphones if you like, and just shout out any blessings you'd like as we head on our way out. Put in your calendar to be together again on the first Tuesday of next month in May.
All right. Everybody have a great week, and God bless. And it's been fun.
Thank you,
Take
guys.
those blessings, everyone. God bless you.
Take care, everyone. God bless.
Bless you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank
You're most-
you. Many
You're
blessings.
most welcome. God bless.
Been amazing. Thank you.
Bye now.